It's the eve of the Six Nations when the hope for every team is at its highest. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. Six Nations time, and I think every Six Nations fan will be hoping, maybe this is our year. May not be a realistic hope in a lot of cases, and there might be kind of a tinge of, for certain teams, are we kind of on the downward spiral, or other teams are feeling like, oh, definitely is our year, we're on the up, and you can see that from results, etc. And then other people will just have a feeling, and sometimes that feeling is right and sometimes it's wrong. But what I'm going to do here is go through each of the teams and talk about where they finished last year, what the fixtures are for this year, what the odds are, and make a prediction about, where I think they're going to finish this year. So I'm going to start with Italy. Last year they were 5th, and, they've never won the Six Nations title, and, it feels like a first title for them is still a long way off. But it probably will come one day. Hopefully during my lifetime. I'd love to see them lifting it. Coach is Gonzalo Caseda. He's been there, I think, for like 2 years now. I think it was like the beginning of 2024 that he took over. Fixtures this year: home against Scotland, away to Ireland, away to France, home to England, and away to Wales. So look at those. I think, certainly first up, they'll look to catch Scotland on the hop and potentially start off with a win. That would be absolutely brilliant for them. And then, that Ireland game, potentially, there could be wholesale changes for Ireland, from Ireland, given that they're first up against France. So potential again to catch them on the hop. France next. Italy have, been pretty competitive against France in recent years in the Six Nations. And then after that, then home game against England, the only team from the Six Nations that Italy have not beaten. So they'd love to, put that right and get a win there. And then finally then to finish off away to Wales. And, there's a reason why the organisers put these two together in the final round, because they think that this may be a wooden spoon decider between these two. Now, it may turn out that way. It may turn out that both of them are mid-table, or even, one of them is at least has a mathematical chance to win the title in the final round. So we don't know until then, but that's kind of going on last year. It seems like that's what they're doing with that. So the odds, 125-1 for them this year, compared to last year, they're 150-1. So they're, those really long odds for them have shortened a little bit, at least since last year. But, there aren't too many people seriously putting money on Italy taking the title this year. For me, I look at how the Italian teams have gone in the URC and in the European competitions. This year, we see Zebre start of the year, won the first 2 games in the URC, looking like, this is going to be a real breakout year for them. Haven't won in 9 games now in the URC on the trot. In Europe, some good performances from them, but that losing streak in the URC really is a worry for them. And then Benetton have been, a bit wishy-washy this year. They're kind of on a downward spiral as well at the minute. Not as strong as we've seen them previously in European competition either. Their Challenge Cup this year compared to, Champions Cup last year. When we think about that, they beat Bath and La Rochelle last year in that competition. This year, they're not up at that level at all. And I kind of worry for them this year. I'm hoping that they're going to be competitive in a lot of the games this year, so we can avoid the whole thing of Italy shouldn't be in the Six Nations, that whole tired argument, that people just trot out, and mainly the people that trot it out are the people that don't watch, only watch maybe Six Nations and World Cups and don't really watch rugby outside of that, certainly don't watch club rugby or URC or anything like that. For me, Italy, they're a part of the Six Nations and they're not going away, and I'm happy for that. But having said that, I think that this year is going to be a little bit of a step back for them. And I think my prediction, they're going to finish 6th with a wooden spoon. I don't feel good about predicting that, but it's just looking at the evidence. I think that's where they're potentially headed this year. And most of it is the fact that, if they can't get a result in those first 4 games, they're going away to Wales for that potential. Again, it's only potential, but potential wooden spoon decider. So that's why I'm predicting for Italy to finish 6th this year. Next time we have France. So last year were the winners, and obviously the last title therefore is 2025. Coach is Fabien Galtier. Fixtures this year: Ireland at home, Wales away, Italy home, Scotland away, and England at home. They are 11-8 on favourites this year, compared to 13-8 favourites last year. So, even stronger favourites to lift the title this year and obviously retain their title. And, if they beat Ireland first up, you imagine they will get some momentum going against Wales and Italy, and then the whole talk of a Grand Slam, that's going to be, I think, through the roof for them by that stage. Some interesting decisions made by Fabien Galtier in terms of his squad selection. Damien Penaud, Gregory Alderete, and Gaël Fickou, who've been stalwarts of the French team, all left out of the squad this year. And France have such a depth of talent that you couldn't see any of the other teams leaving out players not just of that quality but of that standing as well within their squad. Ireland have players who maybe are kind of that level missing, but that's through injury. It's not, it's not the coach just saying, listen, I've got better players than you available to me, and I'm picking them for this Six Nations. You wouldn't see Ireland in that. England, maybe just in terms of the amount of players that they have to pick from compared to, everyone else except for France. But again, I don't think you would see players of that profile being left out. It would be more kind of, players who kind of, England have a lot of kind of similar, very good players who are not necessarily world class. And you could see certain turnover there from them. But this decision from Galtier feels like a big one. And obviously, the right or the wrong of it will be judged on whether France do retain their Six Nations title this year or not. So if we look at the fixtures again, so Ireland at home, they came to Dublin last year and they beat Ireland, and this year now, at home, they'll be looking to, get off to a great start and really kind of pretty much eliminate one of their title rivals, albeit Ireland are still a bit of kind of an outside bet, I would say, for this year, compared to last year. They've gone backwards, whereas, France certainly will be looking to kind of just take them out of the equation, really, by beating them in the first game. Obviously, it doesn't mean that Ireland couldn't go and win all the rest of the games, but, France will feel if they beat Ireland first up, then they'll be looking further down then to, okay, they've got a potential run at the Grand Slam from there. Next then, against Wales, they're away. You could see it being an exciting game, but you feel that France will have too much quality, too much power, not to come through in the end. Italy, as I said, when we talked about Italy, have made life difficult for France at times this year, but I think the squad they picked this year, they're going to be able to bring in a lot of young players who will be bursting to show what they can do, I think, against Italy. And maybe that's going to be enough to kind of negate that awkwardness that they've had against Italy in recent years. Next, then, Scotland away. Potentially, a big banana skin for them, because Scotland seem to have, no fear going against France. They struggle, for the most part, they struggle against Ireland in recent years. But against France, it seems like the way France play the game really suits Scotland and the way they play the game. So, I think Scotland will certainly look at that as a chance to get a win. And then that final game then against England. Obviously, France will be looking for that to be either a championship decider or, potentially a Grand Slam decider between those two, or just France needing a win to get a Grand Slam, whichever. You feel like France, it's hard to think of France not being in the mix to win the title by the time they get to that game. And for me, I think because of those home fixtures against Ireland and England, the teams that finished, Ireland third last year, England second, the fact that they're at home, I'm going to predict France to retain their title. And I'm not too sure yet. I'm not going to predict a Grand Slam at this stage, but I'm looking at it. I think they're going to come very close to a Grand Slam this year, but we'll see later on in the tournament. But yeah, predicting first place for France. Next, we move on to Wales. So Wales finished sixth, wooden spoon last year. Last title was 2021. Coach now, Steve Tandy, taking over from Warren Gatland. It hasn't been all, roses, and chocolates or whatever for him coming in. He's had a tough job of it coming in, but at least it feels like that he stopped that losing streak, that massive losing streak that they're on under Warren Gatland, and I just feel like there's a new broom in there, and there's some optimism around the team, and I think they'll surprise a few teams this year. Not necessarily beating them, but certainly getting closer than a lot of people would predict. And that will probably start with that first game against England. So their fixtures: England away, France at home, Scotland home, Ireland away, Italy at home. And their odds this year, 55-1, which is a bit further out than the 50-1 that they were last year. But for me, as I said, new coach in there. They've got, at the moment, there's a bit of an uptick for the Welsh teams. Cardiff had a brilliant start to the season. They're one of the teams, though, are actually, on a dip at the minute, which is unfortunate coming into the Six Nation period. But you have, the Ospreys, Scarlets and the Dragons all in the last month or so having a real kind of resurgence in the form. But then Wales also have a big contingent who are playing in the Prem in England as well. So getting that mix of those players, I think, and getting them to play as a team is going to be, a big focus for Steve Tandy. Like, he's obviously over the November period had a look at who he has available to him, and he's got a better idea, I think, now what his best 15 is than what it was back then. But during the Six Nations, when you're a coach in your first year coaching the Six Nations, that idea of your best team can drastically change game to game as well. But yeah, looking at the games, England first up, they're definitely going to give that a go. But I think England's confidence at the moment will, even if they get in a bit of a sticky situation, I think will take them through. Home against France, then, I think it'll be one where Wales will score some brilliant tries and maybe score, a few tries in that game, but, France will probably win the game, without kind of sweating on it at the end. So I think kind of there'll be a middle period where maybe swapping scores back and forth, maybe, Wales in the lead, possibly like coming up to half time or at half time, but France then in the second half maybe pull away a little bit, or maybe get out to a lead where they've got the game won, and then Wales get a score or two towards the end, and probably finishing a couple of scores behind, is what I'm thinking for that one. Next then, Scotland at home. Wales be certainly looking at that as a target for a win. Whether they can get it or not is another thing. It's going to be about, how well they've gone in the first two rounds and what Tandy has learned about his team in those and what he's been able to implement from that as well. Wales, I think at the minute, obviously they finished sixth last year, so looking up the table at everyone, as it were. But yeah, I think Scotland, they can make the game awkward for them and maybe make it tighter than it really should be comparing the two teams. Next then, Ireland away. Depending on how Ireland have gone so far in the tournament up to that point, it could be another game where Wales would see it as a possible win. Probably not a probable win, but a possible win certainly. If Ireland are on a bit of a dip, maybe, and maybe a few, like Ireland already have, a lot of injuries, in the front row, especially at Loosehead, and, Wales potentially could exploit something like that later on in the tournament. So it's, I think to me, it's all to do with, are Ireland still in the hunt for the title or not? Whether Wales can really, go over there and produce something. And then finally then, that last game against Italy, that, I imagine that that's already circled on the calendar, for the squad, as in, this is the must-win game. If you lose the other four, okay, put in decent performances, but this one, it's not about a performance. It's about, you got to get a win. We've got to avoid the wooden spoon this year, and potentially Wales could be going into that game, and both teams could be on into that game with no wins under the belt and fighting it, to avoid the wooden spoon. Or even if one or other of the teams has one win, there's probably, a chance for the team that of the two that would be at the bottom to win and move up into fifth place. So, I think that's going to be a massive game for them. But for me, Wales, they're kind of the most elastic team in the Six Nations, and what I mean by that is they seem to be. We've seen it before where they've literally gone. I think they went from like a wooden spoon to a Grand Slam or something like that, or something along those lines, right? Where they seem to be able to kind of bounce back. The last year or so under Gatland wouldn't tell you that, but over a longer period, we've seen Wales being able to find that uplift in form a lot quicker than a lot of other teams. We look at if you look at the teams the other teams that are there, like France, had that period where it, the cliche was which France team are going to turn up, right? And it took them a long time to get to the point where they were more consistent and then started winning titles again. Then we have England, who are also a team you can see under Borthwick have been building towards potentially winning a title this year, but it's been multi-year building for them. The same for Ireland, where it's a long process of building up, and then getting to that peak, and then the dip when it comes, it's difficult then to get back up, and I think that's where Ireland are at the minute. Then we look at Scotland. Like, Scotland have been building towards a performance in the Six Nations for how many years now? But when's the last time they finished in the top two in the tournament? So it's a really long build up for them. And some people would say that maybe another coach would have a better chance, but it's Gregor Townsend there at the minute, so they can't do anything about that. But Wales, it feels like they can almost shrug off previous results or previous year in the tournament, and then just turn up and be brilliant. And I think they're the one team that can really do that. That don't need necessarily that build up. But on the other hand, they could be brilliant this year and terrible next year. There's no kind of real consistency with them, at least in recent years. Obviously, they had that really successful period, but that feels like a long time ago for them now. But yeah, for me, I do think Wales will win that last game against Italy, so I'm going to predict 5th place for them. Okay, next we are on to Scotland. So Scotland finished 4th last year. Last title was 1990, so that was when it was the 5 nations rather than the 6 nations. Coach is Gregor Townsend. Fixtures: Italy away, England home, Wales away, France home, and then Ireland away. Odds 12-1. Last year they were 7-1, so they're another team whose odds have lengthened, and not as much confidence in them producing at the minute. And it feels like it almost feels like their moment has gone for them. Maybe we're gonna be proved wrong about that this year. But yeah, under Gregor Townsend, feels like that moment is gone. But there are a lot of positives for them. So, we've got Glasgow, who are, at the moment, the absolute form team in the URC and one of the form teams in the whole of Europe. You look at them through the Champions Cup, only defending champions Bordeaux Begla had a better record than them in the pool stages. They had that amazing comeback win against Toulouse, which would have instilled massive confidence in those players, and most of those players now are in the Scotland camp, and I think that uplift from Glasgow this year, it feels like they've gone to another level compared to where they were before, and that kind of confidence will transfer over, I think, into a Scotland shirt as well. But then you still have an Edinburgh contingent who seem to have mental issues about producing under pressure, and also being consistent as well. So you have that mix in there, and it's up to Gregor Townsend and his coaches to basically get everyone up to that level where they're feeling supremely confident that even if things aren't going their way in a game, like Glasgow 21-0 down, don't worry, we'll get back into this game. We have the ability to do it, and then go out and produce it. And we've seen Scotland be able to do that at times during the Six Nations, but kind of as one-off performances. But now it's about, can you produce 5 brilliant performances in a row to put yourselves in contention for the title. And that's it for them, I think, is that Scotland generally they have 1 or 2 off days, and it ends up with them being kind of going into that final round. You can imagine themselves and Ireland go into the final round and maybe playing for 3rd and 4th in the table as their finishing positions. I'd love to see Scotland performing, but it does feel like that at some point under if you could get this player group with a different coach, or maybe if they brought in somebody who was a specialist in terms of the mental side of the game. And in addition to the coaches that are there already, maybe that's going to be enough to bring them on. But at the minute, under the current setup, it's hard to see that. But yeah, looking down the fixtures, Italy away, the problem is with Scotland again, you could see them, they shouldn't, like, looking at it, you think Scotland go there, Scotland win. But you could see this Scotland team going there and getting caught with their pants down in the first round and getting beaten by Italy. Then England at home, like they're going to be up for that. The Calcutta Cup, they've had the wood over England up until last year, where England just said, no, you don't anymore. So Scotland will want to kind of reassert their authority, as it were, in that fixture. And obviously not just dent England's hopes at a title, but, potentially they're going in there thinking, okay, if we can beat England, in that game, and coming off the back of a win against Italy, then go to Wales, who we should beat, well, then we're going into playing France and Ireland with 3 wins out of 3, possible Grand Slam and a possible title for them on the line. So, it feels like a lot of focus then is on that England game in terms of their momentum going through the tournament. And the worry with that is they take their eye off the ball for the other 2 games there. So I think it's going to be interesting with that. But then France at home, again, I think the way France play really suits Scotland. And a lot of Scotland's, they have done it against England at times, but a lot of France's big performances in terms of comebacks and getting wins has been against France. And then finally that final game away to Ireland, where potentially Scotland are going in to that game looking to maybe finish, the highest position that they have for a while, or even if they have in the Six Nations, trying to beat the team that has been kind of their bogey team in the Six Nations over the years. So, if they can get I think over that mental block, it may not be enough for a title this year, but I think if they could do that, if they could go to Dublin and win this year, I think then you see a whole different Scotland next year in the Six Nations. But for me at the moment, I think it's difficult to see them performing better than they have previously, just because I don't think the consistency is there from them. So I'm going to predict 4th place for them this year. Okay, next then we have England. They finished 2nd last year. The last title was 2020. Coach is Steve Borthwick. Fixtures this year: Wales at home, Scotland away, Ireland at home, Italy away, France away. Odds 5-2. And those have shortened compared to 4-1 last year. And, so it feels like on the odds, they're going to Paris in that last round for a Grand Slam decider, honestly. And you look at, England, they've got 11 wins on the trot. They're the team coming in to this tournament with the momentum over everyone else. They had a brilliant year last year. Obviously, they didn't win the title, but they came close last year. And they'll want to go that step further this year. And it feels like the players really do have that confidence compared to last year, where, again, if the chips are down against any of those teams that they're playing in the first 4 rounds, you feel like England will potentially find a way to get to a win. Sometimes it may not be pretty, but you feel like they certainly have the ability to win those first 4 games and then go in, knowing that go to Paris, it's going to be a tough ask, but if you can win there, you're lifting the title, and that's massive, I think, motivation for those players. But, we look at England now, as I said, as a test nation. They've done really well in the last year. They're I think, definitely the form team of any of the teams in the Six Nations. We also see that, the likes of Bath have, really come on, won the Prem last year. They did well in the Champions Cup this year, but they also had a lot of really good performing teams in the Champions Cup this year as well. So that's certainly a good sign for them that, there's plenty of top performers there available to them. And I think for England, what it's about now is whether, Steve Borthwick can have his team and stick to that without kind of almost outside interference, because it feels like, with England, just winning at times isn't enough. It has to be entertaining, at least for a certain portion of the fans and the media as well, where, if say England just about got over the line against Ireland, you could see calls for, let's say it's 4-10, calls for, Marcus Smith should be playing 10, or Finn Smith, or whoever, right? Basically, whoever's in the 10 shirt, somebody else would be called to replace them, and in other positions as well, the same kind of thing, the wingers, centres, etc. But it feels like Borthwick knows what the way he wants to play now is a bit clearer, and also the team that he wants to play. Now, you don't always get to play the team you want because of injuries, etc. But it feels like he in his own head, at least, he has a pecking order for his players now, much clearer than he did last year. I think that's certainly going to help them through the tournament. But yeah, we look at the pictures like Wales at home. You'd expect them to win there, but Wales will make them kind of sweat for a while during that game. Scotland away then, I think a very dangerous fixture for them, just because of that almost muscle memory from Scotland, beating England up there. But it's going to be one of those where I think England will see that as this is a real, first big test of the Six Nations. If we want to win the title, we have to go there. You have to win, and they're going to be really up for that. Then Ireland at home, Ireland beat them last year, so there's going to be that whole revenge thing that people always talk about nowadays in rugby. So you could definitely see them pulling off a win there, even if it could be a bit of a scrappy game, that one, maybe like not too many scores in it, and coming down to maybe a late score for either team to win the game. Then Italy away, I think you're going to see England play possibly with a bit more freedom than they have up to that stage in the tournament, because there's going to be a lot of changes and players are going to be playing, to be involved in what potentially is a Grand Slam decider in Paris in the final round. And then we come to that final game away to France, and if they've won the 4 games, they're on a 15-game winning streak at that point then, and it's going to be difficult, I think, for France to beat them. But the fact that France have that home advantage, I think, will be enough. Like, once that French crowd, if France can get a bit of momentum and get them behind them, that could be enough, to undo England, I think, in that game. Obviously, the French crowd, though, if things aren't going well, can be a bit of a detriment to their team as well. But yeah, I think England are going to come very close, I think, to the title this year. But I do think that they're going to finish second rather than first. Okay, and then finally then we come to my own nation, Ireland. So last year finished third. Last title was 2024. Coach is Andy Farrell, so he's back from Lions duty to take over. And we have, fixtures away to France, home to Italy, away to England, home to Wales, home to Scotland. Odds 6-1 last year. We were 7-2. So last year we were the second favourites, but we finished third. And this year we are the third favourites. And, looking at things at the minute, we've got Leinster, who kind of, I guess Leinster, you have to look at it two ways. Like, one, they kind of look out of sorts, but I'm kind of leaning more towards maybe it's just this is a different Leinster than we're used to. It's not the Leinster that tears teams apart, but it is now the Leinster that is able to grind out results, which, you look at the Leinster contingent that are in the Ireland squad, you look at their performances, go back, last season and beyond in big games where that same group of players were not able to grind out results, in semi-finals and finals, etc. But this year they've had to do it a lot, and they've been able to do it. So I think that's going to be a good thing for the squad. The next thing then is who's the 10 is the massive question for the Six Nations, because last year it was is it Crowley, is it Prendergast, and we never really got an answer to that question. And now we have Harry Byrne in the mix as well, who has had a decent season so far for Leinster. And when you look at it as well, the performances of, Crowley's has had a dip in form, and Prendergast is kind of feeling his way back into trying to be number one for Leinster. But Byrne has been the kind of the main man so far for Leinster, and the fact that as well that Harry Byrne took the ball away from Prendergast for that kick to beat La Rochelle was a big statement as well. So we don't know who's our best 10, and what Andy Farrell's thinking about it, and whether the game time is going to be split amongst these players through the tournament, or is Andy Farrell finally going to say, you're my number one, and I'm going to play you. If you're fit, you're playing, all of the big games. You'd imagine that whoever's not the number one, as it were, will probably start against Italy and Wales, and just kind of have swapping in and out that way. But yeah, will we have the same number 10 starting against France, England, and Scotland? I don't know, honestly, at the minute. And, I think that's the big question. There's no Bundy Aki this year because, he was mounting off referees, and got suspended. But I don't think he was honestly a contender, to start. Now, he has been fantastic for Ireland in the past, but he's dipped for Ireland and noticeably for Connacht as well, over the last year. So, and the fact that I think Jude Postlethwaite has come in instead, he's, I think a player who could absolutely have a big impact in the tournament, but he could also be, given Ireland, Andy Farrell and Ireland's track record, he could also be a player who's in the squad who never actually gets to see any game time, or gets to see very little game time through the tournament as well. But yeah, I think there's, and then we also have the whole thing of, the first three loose heads are missing. Furlong on the tight head side as well is touch and go whether he's going to be playing. Keenan broke his thumb or fractured his thumb, so he's out at fullback. So, for me, you're probably looking at Stockdale coming in there, or potentially Osborne as well, in there. And then the wing spots as well. We got no Mac Hansen this year. James Lowe hasn't been in, brilliant form this year either. So there's lots of question marks about this Ireland team. And then we look at the fixtures that we have away to France first up. Like when you're a team that is not too sure of itself and you're trying to feel your way into the tournament, away to the holders and a team that are probably looking to get a Grand Slam this year, is not the start that you want, really. So, and Ireland have been, in past years, very slow starters. They need to build momentum through games, through the weeks, game after game. So it's not ideal start for Ireland, really. And you can definitely, you definitely got to say France are absolute favourites for that game. If Ireland could win there, I think it changes the whole complexion of the tournament for us. But the expectation certainly is that we lose that one first up, and then it's about, what can we do in the rest of the tournament to potentially, arrive in that final round against Scotland with some kind of chance of potentially winning a title. But you look at the rest of the fixtures. Home against Italy, Ireland will probably do what they generally do in that game, which is they'll make a bunch of changes where players who've been on the bench are getting starts, and then a few other players come in, and we look very disjointed, but we eventually kind of get things going and get a win. Then England away, that is obviously going to be a massive game for us, but it's that one I think will probably be the tightest game for us this year, and I talked about it when we did England as well. I think it's going to be kind of a bit of a not a classic. I don't think. I think it's going to be like very attritional game, and England will probably try and bring power against us. As whether Ireland have done that to teams in the past, it's whether Ireland are going to be up for it or not. Will determine, I think, who wins that one. Then home against Wales. Depending on how well Wales have gone so far in the tournament, we may see a lot of changes again to the team for that one. And you would expect a win there, but it's certainly not guaranteed. And finally, then finishing against Scotland, I do think we're going to go into that game, not looking towards the title at all. I think the whole focus of the title in that final round will be that game in Paris between France and England. And for ourselves in Scotland, it'll be about, the mid-table positions. Do we finish third or fourth, or potentially fifth if we lose, and whoever it is between Wales and Italy have already picked up some win somewhere along the road up till then. So I don't think it's going to be the best Six Nations for Ireland, but I think this year is more about bringing players through that should have been done last year, that wasn't done, and now we're kind of playing catch up, and some of it is injury enforced, and some of it is the fact that players who've been there and been doing it for years, their form has just fallen off a cliff, and suddenly we're forced into doing it, whether it's through injury or through the fact that it's very clear that certain players aren't performing up to standard anymore. But it feels like this year for Ireland is, I'm not going to say it's going to be a write-off, because again, you get a win, an unlikely win all the same, but you get a win in the first game away to France, and suddenly people are saying, what dip in form from Ireland? Like, they were just kind of pulling the wool over everybody's eyes, and they're going to be brilliant all through the tournament. But the expectation, I think, is probably a mid-table finish, but I'd be happy enough with that as long as the players who have been brought into the squad, who really feel like that the future of this Irish team at the minute are actually getting to see game time. That it's not a case of, well, those guys, they're in the squad, but they're only going to get like 20 minutes against Italy, or 15 minutes or wherever. So we'll have to see how that goes. But for me, it's an exciting tournament, I think, this year. And the last thing we're going to do, because I know I've gone long already on this, is just have a quick look at the fixtures for the first round. and make predictions for those games. What I will do as well is, at least on some of the games, I might do on all of the games, we'll have a preview with looking at both teams and making a prediction that may be different than I want to make in this one. But first of all, France versus Ireland. It is the reigning champions, the red hot favourites, and potential Grand Slam winners this year, versus a team that really do feel like they're on the slide. And for me as an Irish fan, what I'm looking for is a performance rather than a win in that one. And because of that, then I do feel that France are going to win that one. And the weird thing is, it's on Thursday. Like, that's just, it feels like sacrilege having Six Nations game on a Thursday. And then we have a 2-day wait then for the rest of the games. So on Saturday, we have Italy versus Scotland. And, you know, this one again, you have Italy who, you know, have not been brilliant in the Six Nations in recent years, but, you know, they have a chance here now. If they could knock over Scotland, maybe we're going to see a really good year for them. But then on the other side of things, you have Scotland who have kind of, you know, promised a lot and under-delivered, I think, in this tournament in the last few years. Will want to get off to a good start. So I think this one will be potentially a very high-scoring game. And I'm going to predict that Scotland are going to come out with the win. And then finally, then we have England versus Wales. And you have, again, the form team in the Northern Hemisphere versus the team at the complete opposite end of the scale in terms of form over the last year. Wales at least have broken that losing streak, but they haven't been, you know, we haven't seen a massive improvement from them. They just, you know, stop losing every single game. But yeah, England, 11 game winning streak. They're going to be absolutely full of confidence. Wales will, I think heart and pride, will give it a good go. I think we'll see some decent rugby from them as well, because we've seen the Welsh regions playing some decent stuff, not always winning rugby, but as I said, there is that bit of an uptick from them. So I think Wales will be competitive to a point, but I do think that England will just have too much for them, and it's going to be an England win. Okay, so that's the preview for the this year's Six Nations and the first round. As I said, we will do some previews of individual games as well coming up, and obviously we will do reviews of the games too. So lots more to come later on in the week.